Difficult to know sometimes, isn't it? When do you draw conclusive judgments on teams, and at what point do you draw the conclusive judgments, and at what point, when do you sort of say we need to give this a bit more time to level out before we really judge where certain teams are at? I'm a big believer in the sort of the 10-game mark, so I think anything before that, you've got to be a little bit careful about how early you go in on teams, because there's still so much time for teams to put a run together and change things. But I think it's fair to say for now that in terms of results, at least, that Boltom Wanderers maybe haven't had the start that they were looking for, with just 1 win in 6. Been mixed fortunes, hasn't it, for Wigan Athletic? Leyton Orient, of course, reaching the playoffs last season, a bit of a transitional period on early evidence for themselves with 3 defeats. And Reading, of course, as well, after last season's challenge for the playoffs. Plymouth Argyle, coming down from the Championship, have had a really disappointing start, haven't they? 5 defeats in their opening 6 games for Tom Cleverley. Not the start that they were looking for. Wycombe Wanderers as well, some question marks there. And Rotherham United have winless since the opening day. So a lot of teams that you're expecting a little bit more from to start the season. Which of those teams are ones that we should worry about in terms of the remainder of the campaign, and which ones we confident are going to motor up the table? That's what we're here to discuss on this League One podcast. So if you like what we do here on EFL Debate, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. For now, I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Joseph Pope from Off the Line blog. I used the word Joseph there, and there was a bit formal. Maybe Joe Pope is better. Good to see you, mate. Have you been surprised by the number of teams in League One that maybe haven't hit the heights they were hoping for just yet?
Yeah, cheers for having me on, Gab. Great to be on again. Potentially. I think there's a couple of the teams that you mentioned who I perhaps would have expected a better start. There's some on that list who I perhaps did expect to have 1 or 2 struggles, which will obviously come on to. But I think League One this year is such a tough league that it was always going to be the case that there was going to be 1 or 2 that struggle or perhaps take a while to get going. There's a couple of teams who I've had, say, down near the bottom of my predictions, like Exeter, for instance, who started the season really well. And I think there are a few teams who we will come on to discuss who perhaps have not quite got into their rhythm yet for whatever reason, be it lots of signings or too many signings or perhaps not enough signings. It's certainly a bit of a topsy-turvy start so far.
Well, now's a great time to bring in our first guest of the evening, Mr. Charlie Keegan from the excellent Central Wigan. Lovely to see you as always, Charlie. Thanks so much for your time this evening. I've been encouraged by Wigan's home performances so far this season, because you've won 2 of those home games, and also the performance against Stockport sort of encouraged me, especially with the impact of those wide centre halves, Fox and Ames. And just I'd love you to talk about Wigan's start to the season in general, and also maybe the wide centre backs and their importance to your sort of deliveries.
Yeah, I think you're right to highlight that Stockport game as well. And I think the second half especially, I thought, is some of the best football we've played. We just didn't quite get the rewards. Obviously, we got the 1 goal, Christian Sadie. But yeah, we could have scored 1 or 2 more. And I think that's maybe our downfall at the moment, is we are creating a lot of chances. We're just not converting as many as you would like. But if you compare us to this time last season, or even towards the end of last season, because I know we finished as the lowest scorers in League One, it's a massive, massive leap forward. And while there's still a lot of areas we need to polish off, I'm so confident in what we can do. But you're also right to highlight the width of the centre backs. We have gone to that new formation of 3-5-2, which is a Ryan Lowe preferred system. And Williamson at the moment, I know, Gab, you've been talking a lot about how he used to play out on the right, and I was saying, well, Latix is playing on the left. He's covering it right at the moment because James Carragher had a pretty nasty injury. He had a split muscle above his knee, so he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. So that's not going to be a quick one to come back, is it, when you start getting into rehabilitation? So Ameson's been doing all right there. Morgan Fox has grown into the season, but yeah, they do like to stay quite wide and play a few long balls, get down the wing. My only worry with Ameson, he's not as progressive as Carragher. He doesn't like to get on the ball and really run forward. But you saw at moments in that Stockport game, I think he was being encouraged to by Ryan Lowe. So hopefully that's something we see a bit more.
Yeah, well, I was actually surprised on the quality point because I, like you, I wouldn't have sort of expected him to have that kind of ability. But there were a couple of moments on the highlights where he put in a decent delivery or created something. So I think Fox is possibly a slightly more technical footballer. So it does seem to me like the wide centre halves are going to want to have that job. Joe, is there anything that's kind of stood out to you about Wigan and how close or far away are they from what you were expecting?
Yeah, I mean, I've been quite interested with the role that Sadie's played, because I think if you were to ask Portsmouth fans when he come in, I don't think they would have said he would be that sort of lead the line figure. But it's interesting that Ryan Lowe's sort of felt that he's capable of that role. I just wonder what Charlie thought so far as to him, because obviously it's a slightly different role to what he played at Portsmouth.
Yeah, I think when he came in, I mean, under our old system of a 4-2-3-1, I would have had him in the number 10 role, as that sort of hold up man, but you've got somebody ahead of him as a runner. He is playing quite high alongside Dara Costello, and I think the two of them, they're doing really well in the press, but also chasing down, and they are now target men. You can hit the ball long to them. Sadie's strength is unbelievable, but he's also showing his class as a bit of a runner as well. There's been a few times that we have released him down the left or the right, and he's really got some speed to get going. And at you saw with the equaliser against Stockport, when Ethan Pye tried to come across to him, put his arm out, and Sadie's just walloped him and put him on the floor. And it's that strength that we really lacked last year. I mean, I absolutely adored Dale Taylor for Latics. I thought he was fantastic. Maybe just lacked a little bit of the physicality and just wasn't really, he couldn't do it all by himself, especially when Talo Asgard left. So Sadie is a very interesting profile that we can add to our team. And it reminds me a bit of the strength of a Josh McGuinness, but the touch of a Talo Asgard, his first touch is unbelievable. And then he's got really nice pace and trickery as well. So he's a profile I've been crying out for. There was a lot of Wigan fans saying you'll not find a player like him with all them attributes. And then Christian Sadie's come out of the woodwork and been that player. So he's been really good for us.
Are you confident that you're going to create enough for Sadie and Costello?
I am, yeah, especially when you look at the wing back roles that Fraser Murray and Joe Hungbo are both playing. I think they're more attacking wing backs. I don't think defensively either of them has shown amazing qualities. They have developed a lot over the 6 games already. And I remember when we signed Fraser Murray, I went back and watched a lot of Kilmarnock games. I thought, this guy's not got it, but he's showing that he actually can do it now that he's been really tasked with the role. So I think with the use of the wide areas, the crossing that Murray and Hungbo are putting into the box, and the strength and dedication that Sadie's showing to get to the ball, I do think he's actually going to have quite a few chances to bury them, and he's growing in confidence quite a lot.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case. So from the way you're talking, Charlie, are you maybe slightly more optimistic than even you were before the season?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you sign so many players, especially like we're saying, that forward line, and you go into a new system and there's a lot of players coming in, there's always going to be a bit of an apprehension or a caution of how's it all going to fit? Are we going to gel quite well? Is it not going to hit as much as we want? I think I've been out on my seat more times this year already than most of last season, to be honest. I absolutely adored Maloney. I think what he did with the club to get us through the survival was great. The football was a little drab at times. Ryan Lowe's come in and really put his marker down. And a lot of the signings that we brought in, I've been really excited about seeing. And like you saw, Matt Smith didn't start the season, but he's come back in now and he changed the game against Stockport. So once we start introducing these players back into the squad, I think we're going to have quite an exciting push into the top 10 this year.
Let's hope that's the case. Well, Charlie, it's been great to have you on the podcast, and look forward to catching up later in the season.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Cheers.
Right.
Delighted to be joined by our next guest, which is Joe Bell from Argyle Life. Joe, thanks so much for talking to us. Not a particularly fun time to be talking about Plymouth Argyle, is it?
I'm bored of this, Gab. You only ever have me on when we're being miserable sods, aren't you? So,
well, that's been quite a common trend over the last 3 years, Joe.
Yeah, to be fair, this is a feeling we're quite used to, losing every week and not being competitive on the road. So we're well versed to it. Yeah, not the start to the season we wanted. I think I remember talking to you in the deep dive that we had a really difficult start on paper, Gab. But none of us expected the start to be as difficult as it has been. We are desperately crying out for help, basically, both on the pitch and off the pitch. And Yeah, it's very much a case at the moment, certainly in my mindset, of let's get the other side of the Luton game, let's regroup and let's really kickstart our season then, because the next 2 weeks are just going to be incredibly tough for us with where we are as a group at the moment.
I think what the Pilgrims need now is an anchor, and I think you get an anchor from experience. And I suppose what I'm looking at at Plymouth Argyle as a club right now is you've got David Fox, who's an inexperienced director of football. You've got, I think, the head of recruitment's inexperienced. Tom Cleverley's having his second full season as manager. You've signed a load of players who don't have a lot of experience themselves, and so off the back of relegation, when the fan base is already a little bit sort of edgy, perhaps, about some of the mistakes that were made in the Championship. Do you feel like you've gone too far down the line of this kind of developmental project and not enough in terms of replacing some of those leaders and characters that were so influential in your title win in 2023?
Nail on the head, Gab. We got very fortunate with what we landed on with Steven Schumacher. At that point, the football club felt they were invincible, that the risk-taking decisions they would make would pay off every time. And since then, it's been one mistake after another mistake after another mistake. Look, Miran Muslic, extrapolated over a longer period of games, would have kept Argyle in the division. That's fact. It's his points per game was going to do that. But he ran out of time. The pin absolutely should have been plugged or pulled from the grenade earlier than it was last season, but they didn't. It was almost like they didn't want to accept they'd made a mistake, Gab. And that, that's fair enough. They're proud people. They've got the club to where they'd got on being risk taking and evaluating different processes and data sets. The only issue the fan base have is there isn't a single process or single data set that suggested Wayne Rooney was the right man to come in. When you look at where we were just 12 months ago, we'd beaten Hull on the final day. We'd stayed up. We had an amazing platform to take this football club to a whole new level. And essentially, we turned the shotgun on ourselves. And we're now trying to repair that damage, and it's going to take a while. I was quite ambitious in thinking that we might be in and around the playoff hunt. That is absolutely not going to be the case. The summer transfer window probably underlines to us that the rhetoric we've been given of a top 6 playing budget, it may well have been a top 6 playing budget in 2022-23. The landscape in League One has changed massively in the 2 years that we were out of it. And the deals that we may have been able to conclude 3 years ago, we now can't get done because, the Birminghams, the Wrexhams, the Stockports, the Lutons, even towards the back end of the window, have just changed the landscape. And financially, we can't compete. And we've signed a lot of project players. And you are right. Right now, what we need is the here and now. We need Jamie Patterson to stay fit. We need Joe Edwards to be over his injury issues. We need Connor Hazard back as quickly as we can, because there's 3 key players who, in all fairness, will be starters when they're fit. So Tom Cleverley has very much had his hands tied in the transfer market, and he's absolutely had rotten luck since he's come in the door, because the injury list is just never ending. But touch wood, we appear to be coming out the other side of it now.
Forehead wood, Joe? I didn't know that.
It's pretty dense, Gab. But all being well, other than Zavamichi and Julio Pleguezuelo, by the sounds of it, everyone should be back in the next fortnight to 3 weeks. So there's light at the end of the tunnel in that respect. But I just can't get away from the fact I cannot wait for the 20th of September when we're actually playing a team who are around us.
Yeah, Joe. Fairly close to home for you for Inter Plymouth Argyle. Has their start to the season surprised you, or were you expecting them to have a slow start?
Yeah, I probably expected them to struggle to begin with. Obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of sort of development players. Perhaps got a wrong barometer of what they're like. Obviously, they came to Plainmoor and absolutely ripped us apart. And certainly, in terms of a Plymouth team coming to Playmore, we probably thought that's probably one of the best teams we've played in years for Plymouth. But yeah, it's obviously from Joe's point of view, there's so many players that perhaps haven't played or haven't featured so far that I think would give confidence. Certainly a couple of deals that they've done at the back end of the window, which I actually really like. I love Laurent Tolaj. I think he's going to be brilliant for Plymouth. Really liked him at Aldershot. Obviously, they brought in a couple of players who've been there and done it in League One as well. Alex Mitchell and Owen Dale, I think, are really good additions. So as much as Plymouth fans have looked at, the mistakes that they've made in the window and felt, we haven't bought in a great deal, I actually, looking at it from afar, I actually think they've done some decent business. It's just, unfortunately, they're relying on the 5 or 6 players that perhaps you do have a question mark on to be the answer right now. Whereas I do think of the business they've done, there's sort of 6 or 7 that I think, yeah, you know what, that's decent.
I think that's fair enough, Joe. I think the issue Argyle fans have got is when you lose the 14, 15 players we did in the summer, everyone was producing the same spreadsheet, right? Who was replacing who and who's the direct replacement. I don't think that was fair, frankly, because you're losing championship players and you're bringing in essentially League One players. I think the comparisons we've made is the 22-23 team, the last team we had in this league. And without being harsh to the lads that have played so far, I struggle to see on the body of evidence that we've got any of the starting 11 from the opening day, for example, that would get in that side of Stephen Schumacher's team. I don't see anybody who's a direct improvement than what we had then. And I think that's the issue that the fan base have got, because we were given the rhetoric that we're going to have twice the budget this time around, and this is a top 6 playing budget. And whilst these players may well go on to have great careers, and let's hope they do, and let's hope our form turns and we can, 12th place is probably an outstanding season given how it started. So if we can get ourselves in and around that mid-table hunt by the end of the year, whilst it will be hugely frustrating for everybody this side of Exeter, it will be seen as a result, and then they've got a platform to build on next year. The issue is the messaging that came out in the last week of the transfer window. We had our backsides handed to us by Cardiff on Saturday in no uncertain terms. Tom Cleverley comes out in the press and says we desperately need an experienced central midfielder. We go and sign a 19-year-old who's got 3 senior appearances to his name. Like that's the bit that I think the fan base struggled to get over with at the end. And look, Law McCabe's obviously got something about him because Thomas Tuchel's had him in and around the England squad for the last couple of days. So it's frustrating, but we've just got to trust in Tom Cleverley. And the one thing that is unanimous, I think, around the fan base is whilst 1 or 2 of the selection decisions in the last couple of games have perhaps been queried a little bit, everybody can see that he's trying his best with what he's got. He just doesn't have those 1 or 2 experienced players in that group just to hold it all together. I would absolutely give both of my lungs for Jordan Houghton in the midfield at the moment. I really would. But we don't have him. He, respectfully chose a family decision rather than a footballing one, and as a footballing decision goes, it's a pretty good one as well, West Stevenage are. So it's just been a frustrating 18, 20 months that have just culminated in this summer, and the club have a bit of work to do to get the trust and patience back, I think.
And that's the one thing that I think I would, looking in, I think would probably hang your hat on so far, is that hopefully Law McCabe can come in and be as good as potentially he's been billed to be. I mean, that's the one position. I mean, Gab will know how big a fan I am of Adam Randall. Obviously, it's no surprise.
I heard about him like 4 years ago.
It's no surprise to me that he's gone to Bristol City and they already love him. And I think that's probably the one position that I'm surprised that Plymouth haven't got sorted yet, because they've obviously got a manager in Tom Cleverley who was a pretty decent midfielder himself. And they've got a very, very good person in David Fox, who was a fantastic holding midfielder himself. So you'd imagine, fingers crossed, that Law McCabe has got something about him and potentially can come in and be the answer, because certainly when I look at one thing that they should get right is that middle of the park, because they've got 2 people at the club making decisions who were good midfielders themselves.
Fingers crossed. Well, Joe, certainly a lot of work ahead for Plymouth Argyle after a slow start. So look forward to catching up later in the season. And hopefully you've made a bit of progress by that point.
If I get a message from you in 6 weeks, Gab, and we haven't won a game, I think I'll just ignore it, because it's about time you got me on in a good period, I think.
About time you had one.
It's about time we had one, you're right.
Absolutely. Top man, Joe. Great to have you on, and look forward to speaking soon.
Cheers, Gab. Cheers, Joe. Cheers, lads.
Bye. Delighted to be joined by Neil Rees of O'Bobbins from the Tilehurst End podcast and website on Reading. Neil, thanks so much for joining us. Lovely to see you again. What have you made of Reading's start to the season?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one to start with. Variable at best. I think that's the best way to describe it. Since Kuig took over, I think it's safe to say that he's still probably uncovering skeletons in the closet from the Dye era. So he's having to adjust to that. Coming out of embargo, obviously, we can sign players again, which seems to be a bit of a novelty. And we're kind of almost acting as if it is a novelty, because we don't seem to have too much of a plan of what it is that we're trying to mold into. And certainly from our performances, it all seems a little bit kind of all over the shop. No one really kind of understands what kind of style it is that Noel Hunt's trying to mold the team into, nor what the strategy is in terms of the players that he's recruiting. It's all a bit of a jigsaw puzzle that still needs putting together.
Yeah, I suppose one thing I'm curious about, Neil, is when Noel Hunt came in last season, it was almost like it was kind of a case of galvanizing everybody and bringing everyone together in adversity, which leans a lot more on people skills, and that was a big part of the job. Yep. This year, people skills is obviously, it's always a reasonable part of management, but also because the club is in a more stable position, still not perfect, as you've alluded to, but it's getting better. Yeah. You're possibly asking more from your head coach from more of a technical and tactical perspective. Do you think there are going to be more question marks of Noel Hunt, given the scale of the long-term ambition that Rob Coig has spoken about?
Yeah, you're spot on. I think that one of the main problems that we've got is that Noel was obviously our under-21 manager and quite a successful one at that. So he understood that level, and the players that came through the academy he knew inside out. Also, we had that siege mentality that we had to foster during that time where everything was uncertain on a day-to-day basis. So it's tricky for Noel, because he's a fledgling manager that was thrust in through necessity rather than any kind of choice whatsoever. And now he's having to, fend for himself, if you like, and lean on his assistants. And at the moment, it's a struggle. It's hard to really see what it is that he's trying to embed. He took over from Ruben Sellers when he left for Hull, and we employed that kind of pressing strategy at first, and that was quite successful. But now we've got a new subset of players. We got the loss of Sam Smith and Harvey Nibbs as main parts of what made our system work last year, and now we've got a different set of players. That system doesn't really seem to apply anymore, but we can't see what we're kind of working towards either. Sometimes we're really long, sometimes we play through the lines and it looks quite new, but there's a lot of stuff that isn't joined up, and you don't really know what we're aiming for. What is it that we're trying to get to? And I think Noel's struggling as well, to be honest.
Joe, it does feel like a similar theme to what we've spoken about with regards to Plymouth Argyle, in the sense that we're talking about a club that does have certain aspirations and ambitions to get back to the Championship in the medium term, but also has a director of football in Joe Jacobson in this case that's inexperienced, a head coach that's inexperienced, and a pretty young side that doesn't seem to have much in the way of know-how or physicality either. Are we looking at another team in Reading that maybe doesn't quite have those anchors, I guess?
Yeah, potentially. I think, I suppose one of the questions I would have for Neil, and I suppose if he had the answer, he'd be in a better position than he is, I suppose, is when I look at that Reading team, there are a couple of players in it who I'm really excited for, who I think could be shown more. I mean, Kamari Doyle is a brilliant addition. I think we've not really seen the best of him. You've got likes of Paddy Lane as well, who did well at Portsmouth, and you've got a group of young players who've got real potential. My question to Neil is, how do you elevate that to where the group should be without perhaps having the quality of, say, the coaching there, without making a change? Because yes, they've not started the season as well as they'd like. But I certainly feel on paper the squad's better than what we're seeing. Would you say that's fairly accurate?
Yeah.
How do we
I'd say
make
so.
change?
I think one of the main factors, two main factors I think are key that we're missing, is cohesion as a whole, and a bit of aggression. With the players that you mentioned, you could inverted commas call them flair players, and we've got the likes of Lewis Wing as well, who plays as a 6 at the moment.
You can't put a tackle in Lewis Wing, that's the thing.
He's better at it, but he's by no means a natural. And we've got inexperience all over the park, so it's hard to. They're finding it hard to blend with each other, to say, right, I'll cover you when you go forward. I'll move into this position when you're not. And it's that kind of thing everywhere. It's that know-how. It's that intelligence in game that we've not quite got. And we seem to be, or Noel seems to be in the mode at the moment of, he knows what his midfield is. He knows what his central defenders are. And the rest of it just seems to be like, I'm making up as I go along. And the lack of a forward man, a proper big number 9, someone like a Sam Smith is not something that we've managed to replace at all in any way. We've got Jack Marriott in, but he's a small forward. He's a fox in the box. So it's a case of the players being confident amongst themselves into doing actions that they feel they can do without punishment. And I think everyone's just a bit too tentative and a bit too shy. So it's having that composure in the moment that they can trust everyone around them. And it's a bit harder when you haven't got enforcers around the pitch to help you out. And maybe that'll come in time. I don't know. But if we insist in playing Lewis Wing as a 6 with Charlie Savage or Ben Elliott in midfield, or Kamari Doyle, it's really lightweight. They get around the park and they do a lot of work, but as Gab alluded to, there's not a tackler in there to break things up, and you can pass right through our lines if you want. I mean, Port Vale at the weekend, they were really unlucky not to come away with a point or more, to be honest, because they were doing that at will.
I did have a feeling watching. I only watched the highlights of the Port Vale game, but I did have a strong feeling. I wouldn't be particularly scared of playing Reading.
No.
And that's something that I think has to be changed, whether that's by Noah Hunt or by somebody.
Because at the moment, and I wrote about it at the weekend, is that if we don't score worldies at the moment, we're not getting goals from anywhere. I mean, we were so lucky to get Paddy Lane's winner against Vale because it was a misplaced assist. The crowd were thinking, oh, where's that going to go? It shouldn't have gone where it should have done. By luck, it went to Paddy Lane's left boot, and in the top left-hand corner it went. It was a happy accident. And it is an accident when we score a goal that's like, hang on, that's come from the training ground. This is something they've worked on. Otherwise, it's just Lewis Wing banging in goals, or Mamadi Kamara scoring out of this world headers that he's never done before in his entire life. It's a fluke.
Yeah, so Reading definitely need to build towards a clearer playing identity.
Yeah.
I suppose, Neil, given that we're only 6 games in, are you willing to give things a bit of time before drawing more conclusive judgments on things, or are you a little bit apprehensive about what this season might hold?
A bit of both. I mean, the window's just shut. Obviously, we can still get free agents in, but if you haven't got your free agent in by now, did you really want them in the first place? You know. So on one hand, you've got to give those players that we've got in, and there was 12 that we brought in. You've got to give them time. But on the other hand, within 5 or 6 games, if you can't see a pattern, if you can't see cohesion, if you can't see them fighting for each other, then you do have to start asking questions of how long is Kuig going to give Noel? Mm. And on the flip side of that is Kuig's come in, and obviously he's got a lot to sort out financially, and sustainability is one of his mantras that we keep hearing time and time again. So is he going to want to really pay off the staff that he's got, however much that may or not be, and then pay to get new staff in? And I mean, that whole process in itself is not cheap, and you've got to be really sure of your actions if that's the road you want to go down.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. I think he's an ambitious owner, though, so I think I do think that an improvement in the next month or two is going to be really important. Neil, it's been great to have you on, and keep up the great content that you're writing on the Tala Stand.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Delighted to be joined now by Mr. Matt Lax from the New York Talk podcast on Rotherham United. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time this evening. What have you made of Rotherham's start to the season?
It's been mixed, I'd say. There's parts of really good performances in there where we've not ended up getting the points, but there's quite a few areas of frustration, mainly injuries, to be honest with you, which are absolutely killing us at the time. I'm one of the, as you know from Pascal, I'm a pretty positive guy. I'm in the positive camp at the minute. 5 games into a really, really young team with a young manager. I've seen enough signs to be positive. You know, we need to get better. That's obvious, but I've seen enough signs there's enough good young players in here that I think will hopefully have a very boring season. About 12th or 13th would be quite nice to see it.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, Matt Hamshaw, you would say he's reasonably experienced as a coach, but he's a complete rookie as a number one. It's obvious to me that he has some very good people skills and some very good values. But obviously, becoming the number one, becoming the decision maker, does bring its own challenges.
Yeah, of course it does, and he's kind of learning the hard way, especially when you sign players as a manager. I imagine, this is going to be great. He's going to do this. He's going to be fit every week, and it's going to be brilliant. And then Sam Nombe does 3 months with his hamstring, and everybody else does this, that, and the other. So he is obviously learning. He's learning in the press as well, how and when to be honest, which is a tough thing to learn as a manager. You learn the hard way. When you say one thing, people take it one way, and this, that, and the other. So he is learning, and to be fair, I think he's learning pretty quickly. You know, we were awful against Cardiff a few weeks ago when I spoke. But since then, we've gradually improved in all 3 games. All 3 games, we've picked up 1 point from and not lost in Barnes in the Cup. But justifiably, we could have picked up 2 wins and a draw in those games. Whereas the Stevenage game and the Cardiff game, we rightly deserve to get absolutely nothing from them. So it's only 5 league games, so it's difficult to really pick it to go through the specifics of it because he's so young. But I'm still seeing enough from the team that there is something to build upon there. And you got to bear in mind, I don't know, and this is a hard lesson he's got to learn. He's probably got 5 players in there which are taking up most of the wage budget they don't actually want. So he's got to play around those players as well, which is a really, really tough thing to do, especially in first job as well.
Yeah, in terms of, you mentioned injuries there, who are the players then, Matt, that you feel could come back and make a real difference to this Rotherham United squad?
Sam Nombe is the really obvious one. Sam Nombe, we're getting most teams in this division. The Donny game on Saturday, we just missed that cutting edge. And if Sam Nombe plays that game, we pick up at least a point. I
thought Coletta looked quite bright in the second half.
I love Claire. He's only 20-year-old. He's come from Wolves. He played against Wigan 2 weeks ago and was fantastic on the left-hand side as a left wing back. Started against Barnsley, was completely anonymous, and then came on against Donny and was really good. So he is 20. So what we're seeing is, as you'd expect, really, really good, nothing, really, really good, nothing. So we're going to have to be patient with people like that. But thankfully, he is fit at the minute. Lenny Agbear, who is, I mentioned on the last show, is a really, really exciting centre-half from Celtic, but he's got some severe bone bruising, so he's going to be out for an undetermined period of time, which is again is not ideal. We brought in Martin Sheriff on loan from Everton, who scored against Wigan, looked really, really exciting. He's done his hamstring, so he's out for a month as well.
Forget Matt Hamshaw, it's Matt Hamstring.
Exactly. We brought in Kean Spencer, who was meant to be this kind of energetic ball of this, and he got injured in pre-season. He will hopefully make his debut on Saturday, but as a sub. So again, he's something. I think he was one of the first signings for Matt Hamshaw. So he's obviously somebody that Matt Hamshaw's seen. Right, I want him. I can build around him with this Rathbone type energy that he's got. So it's been a number of injuries. It's not just like all strikers are injured. It's just a pick of each area that's really hurt us so far.
Joe, what do you make of Rotherham?
Yeah, well, obviously my prediction at the start of the season or before a ball was kicked was I thought they'd struggle. My question for Matt really is, do you feel it's, when I look at their business that they've done this summer, there is one or two players on there who I do like, as much as he perhaps wasn't amazing at Luton. I actually really like Tom Holmes as an option, and I do like Kean Spence. But for me, my concern when I saw the names that were coming in is there were too many question marks and too many players who perhaps might be good in 2 or 3 years' time, perhaps not the here and now. And I suppose that's a theme that we've had with all the teams so far, be it Plymouth, be it Reading, is they've brought in lots of players that could be good, but unfortunately you very rarely get time as a manager. You need players that are going to do it now. Do you feel that they've gone too far down the route of players with perhaps really high ceilings, but just not high enough floors at the moment?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, time will tell. The problem he had every player that Steven signed last year was, I think, 26 or over. So he had to bring in youth. It was just an absolute must, because we've still got most of those players left because they're on significant high wages. So he had to find a balance in there. I think, like I said, Tom Holmes is the oldest one. I think he's brought in. And I think that's sensible. I think if he had his go again like next summer, I think he'll bring in 1 or 2 players with a little bit more experience. Having said that, every single player he's brought in so far, I don't have a complaint about any of them. We've seen signs from every single one. They're not perfect, obviously, but yeah, there's no player I'll look at straight away and go, he's a dud. But every single one has shown me something already. Like I said, some of these are going to take time. Lenny was 20, Coletta was 20, but Ajani Martha has been really good, but he's only 21 and he's learning the English game. These are going to be good players, but they are already showing something already that there is something. So I'm sure it's a big job because of the leftovers we had last year and because of the chunk of wage. And we've taken down our wage budget. Not only did they take up a massive chunk of it, we've lowered down the entire budget anyway. So it's a really tough thing. But the early signs from these players are very, very positive at the minute for me.
I suppose the question I then have to you is, obviously every fan goes into the season wanting to have a good season, and everyone wants to be challenged at the top end. But given that you've got a group of players who perhaps have got good potential and you're seeing good signs in, does that temper your aim for the season to solely sort of stay up again, so that you can then build with the team that you've got, say, next year?
I think it's a matter of getting through this season. I'll be honest, I don't think we'll be in a relegation battle, especially, when I know Sam Numby is missing for 3 months, but when Sam Numby is in your team, you don't get relegated. He's just that good of a player, and I think the other players are just about good enough anyway. So I don't think we'll be in a relegation fight. I've got no way in a million years will we. Well, I don't think we'll be challenging for the playoff or the top side of the table. I just think it's unrealistic because there's not enough Sam Numby quality players in the squad. But because of this wage budget issue, it is just about getting through this season. Matt Hamshaw wouldn't sign Jordan Hugel, he wouldn't sign Liam Kelly, he wouldn't sign Joe Rafferty, he wouldn't sign Sean Raggett, but they're taking up, I would imagine, those 4 players are more than a quarter of the entire wage budget. So his hands are completely tied. So it is a matter of getting through this season, getting rid of some of this deadwood, and then the season after, assuming Matt Hamshaw's still here, he can then, well, number one, these young players will have improved, hopefully, and then he can bring some more senior players that he actually likes as well next year.
So just to kind of follow up on that then, Matt, I think that's great that Rotherham United feel that you can see a path forward with Rotherham United, and you see a series of players who there's a little bit of something that you can see in all of them, and you think they're going to get better and better. So that's great, because I've not seen that at Rotherham United for a while. So really excited. Not in a, you've had good teams in recent years, but not that sort of vision, if you like. I'm just wondering, how patient do you think the club is prepared to be at this stage, and is the club realistic about some of the mistakes maybe that have been made in the last few years and the challenges that have come off the back of that?
Yeah, that's the question. How invested is Tony Stewart at the minute? There's always rumours popping up that he's looking to sell, but if he's not looking to sell, he's never been the most patient manager. Look at Evan, his best mate Evans last year. He weren't particularly patient with him when he sacked him. So if we go into December and we are in the relegation zone, will Tony Stewart kind of be brave enough to hold steady and say, I do believe in Matt Amshaw, I do believe in these young players he's brought him, I think he'll get it right. For me, you've got to stick with Matt Amshaw, because it'd be stupid now to bring in somebody else. We've chosen this route. This is the route we want to go down. We want to sign these really young players. We want to back this young manager. And if it doesn't work and we do end up getting relegated, if we think it's the right path, we think it's the right path to go down. You've got to stick with it. How many teams have gone down to League Two and bounced straight back and look stronger for it? You've got to pick a path. What we've done over the last 2 or 3 years is, right, Matt Taylor, you're our man, we're going to back you. Actually, we're not. We're not going to back you. Steve Evans, you're our man, we're going to back you. Actually, it's not going well enough. We're not going to back you. You need to choose your path. And if we've chosen, we're now so far down it. If we sack Matt Amshaw tomorrow and bring in an experienced manager, they don't want 20-year-olds that they've not signed. That's not what they're going to want. You've chosen this path. You've got to go down it. Stick with it. And I believe these players are good enough to have a pretty quiet season.
Do you know what, Matt? You've kind of, as you know, I've been very, very sceptical of Rotherham going into the season, but listening to you there, I've lifted up. You've rubbed off on me a bit there, Matt.
That's my job. I am a very, going on social media, I might not be so positive. But I am genuinely positive that I like all these young players. I've been waiting for so long for Rotherham United to go sign youth, exciting youth, and they've finally done it. And like I said, all of them have got something. It's just how far they can go.
Well, fingers crossed for you, and look forward to having you on the podcast again soon. And keep up the great stuff on New York Talk, mate.
Cheers, mate. Have a good one, boys.
Top man, Matt. Delighted to bring in our next guest, which is Colin Yates of the Fan Zone podcast on Boltom Wanderers. Carl, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time this evening.
Pleasure.
1 win in 6 for Bolton to start the season. Not quite the start in terms of results. Is the performance-based picture slightly more positive than perhaps results might suggest?
1 loss all season, Gab. 1 loss all season is a better way of looking at things. What do you think to that?
I think Bolton Wanderers are ambitious, and I think they want to be challenging for promotion. And I think in order to do that, you need to make sure that you win enough games. Yeah,
good answer. Yeah, listen, it's been a bit underwhelming, to be honest with you, Gab, the season so far. Yes, we are undefeated in several games now, but they've all ended in a 1-1 draw. Obviously, it's we are very mindful of the fact that we've signed, I think, 14 players, I think, during the course of the summer and the end of the transfer window. So obviously, Shuey's decided to put his own stamp on the team, shall we say, and clear the decks, of which we're all very pleased about. And I think he's certainly upgraded, believe it or not, although I am very house proud about doing he's upgraded our squad from what it was last season, Gab.
Joe, you had your doubts about Bolton Wanderers before the season. Just talk to us about where you were maybe a little bit sceptical of them before the campaign.
Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest reason why I had all the comments I did in my predictions. People said Bolton fans assured me that they were going to have a good season.
You have to be very careful, Joe, with bold statements with this fan base of ours.
Yeah. I mean, I think the squad is I did have my concerns on the squad in terms of depth. The starting 11 at its strongest yet, potentially, decent side. One or two injuries. I didn't feel that the squad was strong enough. It's quite funny to see all the people or the Bolton fans said before ball was kicked, we've got a very, very good squad. And then the first 3 or 4 weeks, all I've seen is Bolton fans say, he's not good enough and he's not good enough. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to take time. I think it's a very different style to what Ian Evatt perhaps employed. And one thing that I can say is that I can see more of an idea of what Schumacher wants to build in terms of the players that he's brought in. But it's going to take time, I suppose, for Bolton. Are they willing to give it the time to get to where it could be?
Oh, don't talk to Col about time.
Jeez, I feel like I've been saying this for about 4 years now, or whatever it's been.
But yeah, I mean, I suppose the question to you, Cole, is obviously Bolton fans expected to be challenging. I suppose, what do you feel is the reason why they haven't perhaps been winning games consistently so far?
I just think there's an element of the team not necessarily being fully cohesive just yet, Joe. When you sign so many players, when you try and fill your squad up with better backup as per your original kind of thought process, you're gonna take a little bit of time to kind of get them players to kind of gel together, and I think that's ultimately the reason why we haven't picked up as many wins as we probably should have done. These aren't excuses. We have been quite wasteful, but I like to think with the fact that we've signed players from a higher level, that gelling that I'm referring to is going to happen sooner rather than later. What's the biggest kind of noticeable difference this season compared to previous is where we're getting these players from. Obviously, we're signing players to play at a higher level, be it the Championship or be it other places in Europe, such, of course, Ibrahim Sissoko, for example, from Toulouse. We're signing players who shouldn't necessarily be at this level, so therefore have got the quality to kind of get themselves going a little bit sooner rather than later. I think we're due to batter somebody, to be honest with you, Joe. It's been long overdue, I think, in this last few games.
I mean, one of the questions I would have, I do like a lot of the business that you have done, but it's something that certainly Plymouth fans think with their team, and obviously Reading as well. You mentioned the likes of Sissoko, and I grouped 3 players, Sissoko, Kozia Dewberry and Gale, 3 players who on their day can be game changers. But do you feel that they're players who are very much great when it's going well, and that potentially the balance of the squad, you've not got that sort of grit to win when you're perhaps not at your best? Was that something that the other 2 teams as well have said, that they've got players who can win a game when it's all going great, but perhaps haven't got that underbelly of real steeliness about them?
I'm not so sure that's applicable anymore, to be honest. I think the wingers or the wide players, the wide forwards in Ibrahim Sissoko and Gale, we haven't really seen as much as we would have possibly hoped from them two just yet. But there's been a lot of rotation in the first few weeks. So naturally players aren't going to be able to kind of be up to the standards straight away when they're getting swapped and changed about, certainly early on in the season. Mario Kozia Dewberry is far too good for this level, gents. Like, there's absolutely no debate about that. Like, he's head and shoulders above this standard of football. And he will most likely be one of the top performing players, throughout the division come the end of the season. So no concerns over him. Obviously, signing Marcus Forss from Middlesbrough on loan is a forward who can play through the middle and obviously play off the right and off the left as well. So he gives us yet another option in them wide areas.
He's something different, isn't he, Cole? Because he's more of a strong runner. I think Marcus Forss will create space for players like your flair players like your Kozia Dewberry and your Gale.
Absolutely.
Because he's happy to run the channels, and it creates that space for others to come in there.
Yeah, I think one thing Shuey was keen on having is 3 kind of central forwards who've got a little bit of something different individually. So if you look at the likes of if you look at like Sam Dalby, obviously more of a physical kind of central striker, traditional number 9, you might say. Obviously, then you've got Marcus Forsey, we've just touched upon, who can obviously play across the whole kind of front three. And then you've got Mason Burster, who's started the season really well, who's kind of like more a central forward, but kind of link play quite well as well through the central areas. So we've got a bit of everything in them three, to be honest. And I think then with the wide men as well, I think we're in for a pretty exciting season, to be honest. To answer your point, Joe, about the steeliness, if that's the right word to use, if that even is a word, we've obviously brought in Ethan Arahan from Lincoln in central midfield.
Great signing that is.
It does give you that kind of steeliness, and also Xavier Simons as well from Hull, who again he's got that little bit of industry about his play as well. That was going to be, of course. Sorry, go on.
That was going to be one of the questions that I followed up with. Really, is how impressive you've been with Xavi Simons so far, because it perhaps doesn't surprise you that I've been keeping an eye on what Bolton fans have been saying so far. And that's something they've certainly been quite impressed with.
Yeah, he's a little bit different to what we've had in the centre of the midfield for quite a while. He's got that kind of all-round kind of thing to his game, which is quite impressive. He drives well with the ball through the central areas, and he uses the ball very well. That's kind of my early observation from him. And listen, if you're keeping Josh Sheehan and Aaron Morley at the side, then you're a decent player. We're kind of embarrassment of riches through them kind of two.
It's lovely to have that kind of depth, to be able to have those players in reserve. So it shows.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the target was, is to try and build that steeliness through the midfield and have options. Listen, Josh Sheehan should get him pretty much every side in the division, I would have thought, and he's on the bench. So that tells you everything you really need to know. I think one thing we are a little bit, or I've been a little bit mindful of so far, is kind of Shuey's decision making in terms of who he plays and when. I don't know whether it's because obviously he's trying to get minutes into players, but we had an instance the other week where Arahan and Simons both played really well. I can't remember who it was against. I think it might have been against Plymouth actually, and we won 2-0. But then he played them again against Reading midweek, and I was a bit like, that didn't need them two sitters there. Aaron Morley could have played a little bit more advanced in that game, because Reading were obviously going to come to our place and sit every man behind the ball. So I'm a bit. His usage of the central midfield positions at the moment is questionable from my point of view. But again, I think it might just be simply because he wants to give players minutes, and again, you shouldn't really change your winning side. And of course, we beat Plymouth.
So just in summary, Cole, before I bring in my next guests, do you feel like, even though it's just the one win and the one defeat,
exactly.
There's enough in performances like against Lincoln, where you absolutely peppered them second half, like against Blackpool, where you definitely created the better the more chances, that actually there's enough in performance level to think that you're gonna motor, at some point?
Personally, Gab, I've seen enough to be pretty confident for the remainder of the season. It's just a case of clicking. When it clicks, like I said, we are due a pretty decent win. Although, having said that, to caveat that slightly, I feel like I've been saying this for the last few years. I'm trying to not get too carried away, but I just keep thinking back to the fact that we've signed players, lads, from higher up the pyramid, and when you put them players in against the opposition in this league, you like to think that we'll have enough to be in that top two conversation, and I'll be quite surprised if we're not, to be honest.
Absolutely. Cole, thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to chatting again soon.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a nice evening.
Cheers.
See you later.
We will be joined by James Richings from Bucks Free Press on Wycombe Wanderers in a moment, but I'm delighted to be joined for now by Adam Parks for the Lowdown podcast on Leyton Orient. Adam, thanks so much for joining us. I think a bit of a rebuilding period for the O's, isn't it? 15 new additions after losing numerous key players last year. A couple of undercooked performances. Are you expecting yourselves to improve once Richie Wellens kind of gets to the bottom of some of the recent challenges?
Just look at the analytics of it, Gab. That's what Orient do. We start poorly and we build up every season. It's apart from the year we went up as champions in League Two, we've improved under Richie as the seasons have gone on, and the turnover of our squads every summer has been ridiculous. We're now in a position where obviously the sales of Galbraith and Brown has given us a little bit of a buffer in terms of finance, and we've started offering players that, with a couple of exceptions, are probably upgraded in every position. 3-year deals. So to have 15 players come in, I think 11 on perms maybe, especially some of the names that are coming up.
Don't really mind what the hair's like, to be honest.
Well, but I mean, if you've got 11 players on 3-year deals and maybe 8 or 9 of them stick around, then you're not turning over your squad again. So do I think this year is a year where we're going to consolidate? No, I don't think so. I think there's enough that we've seen so far that it will improve, and I think Richie Wellens has got the track record about him that's going to obviously improve as the season goes on. I don't think we're a Peterborough, if you want me to get harsh.
I think one thing that stood out to me, Parksy, from the last 2 games, I think it was the one before this was the week before, where he lost 4-1 at Mansfield, and I think Richie was a bit frustrated with the players that might not have been in a great physical condition to play, but didn't sort of disclose that, and I think he would have wanted a bit more transparency. It's difficult sometimes for players, isn't it? Because you don't want to say, oh, I can't play, because that comes, you feel like your manager might assume certain things, or there might be somebody else coming in that takes their place. But it does show that we're in this kind of turnover period where there's still some good players, but it's about finding that dynamic, that synergy that you had last season, and it's going to be a new one.
Well, as a bar manager that does sometimes 60, 70 hours a week, I've still got to turn up every day and do my job. Players need to do that as well. The fact that they're, in the first, it was worrying, I won't lie, in the first 4 or 5 games of the season, our manager's talking about fatigue. Means that potentially he had to change the system just to facilitate the players that we had. Look, they haven't gelled. There are players that are obviously not fully fit. We've taken Alfie Lloyd on loan from QPR, who I think would be in a position, if he was fully fit, to absolutely rip up the division and fully back up, or if not, work in tandem with Aaron Connolly. 2 massive upgrades in our squad. And he got injured in the first week with us, and he's had surgery, so he won't be playing until November. So I think you have to have a balanced view of how the beginning of the seasons come. I think we shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves either way of the curve. And there are a couple of bright sparks. You've got Morehouse, obviously on loan from Man United, who's a bit lightweight, but he's one of those players that if he's got space in front of him, that he's very technically gifted and he has a good eye. So for a pass or a shot, he's got a good goal against Peterborough on Tuesday. Charlie Wellens is a player, obviously, that's known to the manager, obviously being his son. Man United player, former ex-Man United player, again, who didn't really get the opportunities he could have done at Reading. And he's got a point to prove, and he scored a screamer on Tuesday as well, and after having a few good games during pre-season. So we've only got him until January. I think it's about putting him in the shop window at worst for us, but I think we might end up signing him as well. So look, it's such a weird position to be in, because we're as a club, we've been taken over with great schemes ahead in terms of new stadia, relocation, but within the realms of sustainability. So we're not going out and spending lots and lots of money on players. We are essentially taking the money that we've got in, and we are investing it in contracts so we can keep our players. I think that has been the biggest fault of our hierarchy in the last few years, which is the fact that we're constantly churning over squads. I think Richie Wellens now, with a 3-year contract, with players with 3-year contracts, you'll see a different start to next season if we're still in League One. But look, I think in terms of quality, the majority of players that have come in are on par, or some of them are much better. I think you say El Mizouni, you say Aaron Connolly, they're not League One players. I don't think Mizouni got the rub of the green Oxford. I think he was playing well, and then obviously Rowett came in and didn't fancy him. And then you've got Aaron Connolly, who's had his own troubles, but different type of player. He's probably, in what I've seen of him this year, one of the best players I've seen in an orange shirt for years. He's, for a forward, he's complete dropping deep. Great passer of the ball, great movement, decent finisher. So look, listen, you ask the questions, I'll try and keep them. You know what it's like. We haven't spoke for a while, Gab. I'll just keep rambling. You just kind of have some punchy, I'll get some punchy answers out.
Joe, what have you made of Orient? And are you surprised that they've not hit the heights they might have hoped for just yet?
No, I'm not surprised they've not started well. But I'll be bold and say I think of all the teams that will cover today, I think Orient will finish the highest out of all of them.
Over Bolton?
Yeah. I said
I know it's past 5 o'clock, Joe, but I mean, yeah, how many Cronenbergs have you had?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was really bullish about Orient before a ball was kicked. I put them to finish 4th. I really like a number of the additions that they've made. And I suppose for Orient, I think it's much about just letting, certainly from my point of view, just letting Richie Wellens mould this squad because he's a fantastic manager. And obviously we saw how at the end of last season they hit their groove right towards the end. And given the quality that they've brought in, I think once he finds the right balance and finds some consistency, I think we'll see this Orient side just get better and better. I mean, I look at those wide positions in the forward area. Obviously, you mentioned Alfie Lloyd, someone I'm a huge fan of. Probably my favourite player in the division in Ollie O'Neill as well. Mm. And obviously Josh Koroma, who can be a real game changer on his day. So, yeah, I mean, perhaps a little bit misguided. I don't know. I mean, I really like this Orient team. I think they'll be in and around it.
Yeah, I think we should probably be about 4 or 5 points better off than what we are. But I also think there's a slight imbalance in the squad. I don't think we're strong enough in the centre of the park in terms of losing someone like Jordan Brown. I know Backinson's a decent player, but he's been very 50-50 in the games that we've seen so far. And Morehouse, like being lightweight, we don't have that kind of, like you were talking to Cole about Steele earlier in the Bolton team with Erhan, and it's just not the same thing. We don't have that kind of engine in there. So I just want to see where we're at the 1st of January or whenever the next window opens, because I believe if we can get to Christmas and we're on 30 to 35 points, then I do fancy us to make the playoffs because we'll come strong in the second half of the season. But I think we're probably one player light.
And are you perhaps a little bit surprised that they've not addressed that in the summer? Because obviously I was at that final, thanks to Gab, obviously for the Orient game. And that was one takeaway that I had, was that I liked a lot of what I saw, but I just didn't think there was anything in midfield.
I think the creativity is the massive issue. I mean, when you're playing someone like Ethan Galbraith, who's proven how good a player he is in the Championship currently, I think he's had 3 or 4 player in the matches already this season for Swansea, playing at right back. That's where your creativity was in the squad. It was at right back, and because other teams can't really facilitate a tactical shape to defend against a right back, it's difficult. Look, I think Gab's constant, from the whole time I've been doing these debates with Gab, he's constantly talked about with the Orient's midfield. We've had a good player in there all the time. It's just there's something missing. I would like to see. I think it would change, honestly, if Don Ballard hits the ground running, because I think if that young lad can get ahead of steam and Aaron Connolly plays in behind him, I think our creativity then will come from Aaron Connolly, because I believe he can play in that 10. At the moment, we've been playing Dilang Jayasimi there, and he's simply, I like effort. I'm not going to say anything bad about him, but I don't think he's up to the quality to play that 10. We've got Azim Abdullahi who can't get on the pitch, and then when he does, he takes someone's head off. Like it's one of those situations where maybe we do have that one player. Maybe it is Aaron Connolly dropping deep. Maybe it is, using Mitchell out wide and pushing Koroma or O'Neill in the middle or something like that. I do believe we are one short in the middle at the moment. But again, look, I watch the games. I've watched football all my life, but Richie Wellens seems to come up with all the answers quite regularly, and I'll probably leave it at his table to deal with that. He owns it. as he goes, and I wouldn't want to be putting anything on his table that he wants to come at me with.
That's wise. Great stuff. Lovely to have you on, Paxi, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks very much, guys.
Top man. Delighted to welcome our final guest of the evening, James Richings. Thanks for coming on, James. Sorry to have kept you waiting. Looking very smart this evening as well. I don't know whether that's for us or...
No, I'm not going to a wedding reception or anything like that. I just had a lot on today and I just needed to look a bit smart. So it looks like I'm representing the Liberal Democrats. I can show you I'm not. But I
thought it was more Jim White.
Yes,
deadline day time.
Monday, of course, yeah. I'm either very late to it this week or I'm very early for next year. That's what it is.
Absolutely. Wycombe Wanderers, I think it's fair to say, haven't quite had the start that you were hoping for. A little bit of a restlessness around Buckinghamshire.
Yeah, a bit. I would say the hangover from last season's ending hasn't really gone away. It's been a real summer of change at Wycombe. So they've signed 16 new players. Pretty much all of Matt Bloomfield's players have gone, other than the odd few. And obviously we've got 2 remaining from the Gareth Ainsworth days, and Josh Scowen and Jack Grimmer. It's just been it's been very difficult from a Wycombe perspective. It's been very difficult, and the shift for the last 12 months has been nothing short of remarkable in a negative sense, because Wycombe had a fantastic start to last season. They were top and second for large parts of the autumn. Now they just cannot buy a win whatever they do, and you got to look at where the problems are coming from. And I think it's just the fact that they are doing something so different than what they've done before. They're playing a very dynamic style, which the club aren't really used to. Mike Dodds has said that he wanted pre-season so that he can really put his stamp on what the club wants and how the club want to go going forward. You can see what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
The last 2 games have been so bad. The last week against Stevenage, it was so poor. Not a shot on target in the entire game. And they had 61% of the ball, just nothing with it. And whenever they get to the 18-yard box, instead of knocking it into the box, they just sort of pass round to try and find their way through. And you're screaming, thinking, just knock it into the box, cause a few problems. And then the only time they really did that was within the last minute or 2 of stoppage time, and they ultimately lost. And on Tuesday night, I know it's the EFL trophy, but they put a relatively strong side out. They didn't put any academy players in, not that I can recall. First teamers, albeit a few on the fringe side. It was atrocious. It was so bad. Colchester could have easily won 4-0. League below. Wycombe scored a very good goal through Alex Lowry, but there was just nothing in that display. It was genuinely abysmal. And the boos at Stevenage and the boos at Adams Park on Tuesday, you can't ignore them. They were very audible. But I like to think that, like with Bloomfield, albeit under a different regime at the top, a manager or head coach needs time. Mike Dodds has said he needs certain players to fit the style that Wycombe need to going forward. He says he wants pre-season. He needs time, and I don't think he'll be going anytime soon.
I mean, Joe, one thing that strikes me about Wycombe is they, given what they did in the first half of last season, it's one thing that, you've got to, Matt Bloomfield went, you've got to replace him with another head coach. But in terms of transfer activity, I think they brought in, it was 10 senior players that they signed in January, and then 15 in total. And then they've signed another 15, 16 players this summer. I think most of them senior players. It just makes me think, given they were in such a good position, does it question the strategy even above the coaching role of why do you need to bring this many players in? Who needs this many players that Wycombe Wanderers have got?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think if they were, coming into the season from a state of, being really poor and needing lots of change, I think you can understand them making the number of changes that they've made. But to bring in as many players as they have done. I have been a little bit surprised. One thing that really struck alarm bells is I listened to Mike Dodds' interview after the last game, and he talked about, I want a small squad, and yet they've gone and signed as many as players as they have. It's like, is there no joined up thinking?
Complete misalignment with what he wants and what the board are going for, and it's has he not spoken to the board about who they're signing?
I mean, that would be one of my fears, is that throughout the summer he's talked about, don't really like loan players and like a smaller squad, and then they've gone and signed as many loan players as they have on the final couple of days and got a massive squad. It's almost as if he's having all the players signed for him, and he's kind of just being given these players.
No, it's a very valid point, because from the outside looking in, that's how it seems, and it's almost you're putting round holes in square pegs sort of thing. And it's an interesting one, because last season Mike Dodd said on a few occasions that the squad was too big for his liking. So we saw the mass exodus at Adams Park this summer. It was huge. It was absolutely huge. Wycombe have pretty much got a brand new squad, and it was quite incredible. And I think what Wycombe need is that they just need the time to gel. But I get what you're saying. It does seem a bit odd that certain things are said, and then the actual thing that happens is the complete antithesis of what was said, and it's almost as if, well, that's not what I asked for, but I've got it now, so I might as well deal with it. Mike Dodds does have a say in transfers. Obviously, he's not. I don't think he's part of the negotiations. I don't want to be quoted on that, but he does have a say in the transfers, because ultimately he has to be coaching the players that Wycombe are recruiting.
And also, just to add to that, there was a lad that who's the one at Birmingham? Boyd Muntz. There you go. Who he worked with. So there is that. Yeah.
Exactly. And then that was the reason why Boyd Muntz wanted to join Wycombe. He had a few offers, Championship as well, but he wants to drop down to League One and work with Mike Dodds, because they had a very, very good relationship at Birmingham. So it's not a case of the Wycombe hierarchy saying, here's a player we're going to sign and you now need to make him a well beater. It's a case of, here's what we're looking at. Do you think this will fit the system? What do you think? And obviously, Mike Dodds has a say. He just doesn't have I personally don't think he has anything to do with contract negotiations or wages or anything like that. He's just looking at it from whether or not if this person can fit into the system that I am implementing to get Wycombe promoted, because that's what Wycombe want to do. I know it's been a dreadful start. It's Wycombe's worst league start since 1998-99, and it's honestly in the third tier, I should say. And you look at the performances, every single game Wycombe have played this season, they have had more possession, yet they've only won once out of all the games they've played, and that was thanks to a last-minute own goal in the first round of the League Cup. So it does really paint a picture. I really want Mike Dodds to succeed. I've spoken to him every time Wycombe have played when I've gone to the games, and I can tell you this, on the record, he is a salt-of-the-earth guy. He is a lovely, lovely bloke. He really, really is. And I really want him to succeed. But at the moment, it's just not clicking. It's just not happening. He has said one day Wycombe are going to win 4-5-0 and everyone will see what we're trying to do. And we've seen it away at Bradford. We saw it at home to Stockport. We saw glimpses of it against Reading.
Exeter even was one where they scored through. It was a Grimmer own goal, and that was their only shot, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And probably should have won that game. So there have been games where it's gone against you, and maybe if you'd got a few more points, I think that might take some of the intensity out of the conversation around things.
No, I agree. You just need that one ricochet to go in, and it completely changes things. But unfortunately, that you can't hide away from the facts, and the facts are that Wycombe have only achieved one win in the last 14, and regardless of what your aspirations are, that is not the form of a team that's going to get promoted. That's just not. And you look at those games. Out of those 14 games that Wycombe have played, they've lost 9 times. That it's relegation form. That's what it is. Wycombe haven't won at home since April. They haven't won away since April. Since Charlton at home on Easter Monday, Wycombe have just looked completely and utterly different. And obviously, we're in September. There are 40 games left in the league season. We saw with Charlton, I think, 2 seasons ago now, they finished 16th, weren't very good. They had a really bad start to last season, yet they had this incredible run of form and got promoted. So it isn't to say that obviously everything is different circumstantially, but that isn't to say Wycombe can't have a good season. But it has been a very, very poor start, and Mike Dodds just needs to win. He just needs a very, very fortunate 1-0 win or a hard-working 1-0 win. He just needs a win to get the monkey off his back. And when that does happen, you'd like to think a stream of wins will eventually follow.
The 2 questions I did have actually was that almost relate to each other. Is you mentioned how nice a guy Mike Dodds is. I'm a big advocate that teams reflect their manager. So I suppose the first question is, do you think Wycombe are just a bit too nice at the moment in the way that they play? And then I suppose the second question is, how much of a miss is someone like Josh Scowen?
No, 2 very, very good questions. And the Josh Scowen thing, massive, absolutely huge. He was one of Wycombe's best players last season. I mean, he's been a consistent performer for Wycombe since he rejoined in 2021, and he's a fan favourite. You don't rejoin a club several years after you left if you don't have a strong connection. And the fact that he's got an ACL injury and the fact he's in his early 30s doesn't really paint a good light going forward, because obviously he's now he's getting to that twilight stage of his career. We don't know if we're going to see Josh Scowen in a Wycombe shirt again, depending on the form of the other midfielders that Wycombe have signed. And he's at that age now. He must be 32, 33. So I really hope he comes back, because he's so important to Wycombe, and he is a huge miss. But Wycombe have recruited. They signed Magnus Vestergaard, their record signing in January. They've got a plethora of midfielders now. You've got Hugh and Henderson. You've got Boyd Muntz. I mean, they've signed so many players, I can't even think of them all, honestly. They've signed so many. And in terms of the style of play with Wycombe being too nice, I think that's a very valid argument. You look under when Gareth Ainsworth was there, and I don't like going back into the past, but when Gareth Ainsworth was there, he achieved 2 promotions with Wycombe with probably less ball percentage you could possibly imagine. And Wycombe were horrible to play against, like absolutely horrible. But from a Wycombe perspective, you loved it because you got the win. Even under Matt Bloomfield, it was different because it wasn't lump it forward to the big man. It's similar to Mike Dodds where they passed the ball about, but there was an aggressive. They were aggressive under Bloomfield, like so aggressive. They had this urgency where they wanted to get the early goal, especially when they went on that long unbeaten run. It was like, get the early goal and don't hold back. It was like playing against your brother at FIFA. You go 1-0 up, you're not going to sit back. You want to go 2-0, 3-0, 4-0. Mike Dodds' style of play isn't really like that. But in our press earlier on today, he did say that he doesn't want to be this team where they have so much of the ball and they do nothing with it. He's actually very much against that. He wants Wycombe to have the ball, but do something with it. Like get the crowd excited, challenge someone. Don't just have the ball about and pass it passively. And before you know it, 15 minutes have gone and the game's going.
Yeah.
That's been the problem that Wycombe have had. And it was evidently clear on Saturday against Stevenage, which led to the boos and jeers, which I've never seen like that before.
Well, it's good that Dodds is aware of that. I mean, one question I would have for you, James, if you've got time for a couple more questions.
Of course.
Cheers. Sometimes we talk about managers needing not all the qualities that you need from a management team come from the manager or the head coach, and you'll know that as well as anyone with Gareth Ainsworth and his assistant Richard Dobson, which was a really good combination in a different way. I think with Mike Dodds, I think he's proven himself as a coach, but I do wonder if he needs an assistant who can bring that slightly more aggressive side, someone who can be maybe slightly harder with his players, dare I say, someone who can be a bit of a yin to the yang and bring different values into the management team. Is that something that you think Mike Dodds might need at this stage of his career?
It's very apt you say this, Gab. It's very apt. I was listening to the HP 12 podcast this morning, and the wonderful guys on that podcast, I really hope you got... to people watching, I really hope you give it a listen if you're interested in Wycombe. They said something very similar. because usually you need like the good cop, bad cop. You need the yin and yang. It's almost as if everyone is sort of the same in the dugout, and obviously it depends on who you ask. But in my opinion, things work when you have opposites.
Yeah,
because opposites attract. If you get two things that are the same, you're not going to get a reaction. It's going to be quite passive. So, yeah, I mean, Pete Shuttleworth is Wycombe's assistant to Mike Dodds. Obviously, he's got a fantastic CV. He's been at many clubs, and he knows how to get a tune out of players. And obviously, this is a new job for him too. But we just need, in my opinion, a bit more. We just need to see a bit more animation on the touchline, in my opinion, because it just gets the crowd going. Before the Reading game, which was a couple of days after Wycombe had lost 1-0 to Exeter, thanks to that Jack Grimmer own goal, I said on a podcast that, just get the crowd up. Reading, local derby, both teams don't like each other for many reasons. I won't go into them because it's an endless list. But I said, if Mike Dodds wants to get the crowd on side, just wave your arms about, just do something. But he's a very calm and collected individual. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not, because we've seen it with other managers who are calm and collected. The one that sits in my mind is Marcelo Bielsa. He would just sit there and watch intently, but he managed to get a tune out when he was at Leeds. So Mike Dodds, obviously, he's not going to change his principles just to bow down to the pressure that the Wycombe fans are giving, and I respect that, because you've got to hold on to your true beliefs.
Yeah, sure.
But then I think you do need to have a look and think, okay, things aren't working at the moment. What do I need to change that? And I think some of his comments have rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way. For example, when he said last week after Stevenage, he has no plan B. We just need to make plan A better. Even I'm not going to react to it. Even I thought that's a very brave thing to say. Very brave thing to say, especially when you're on the winless run that you're on, because it's almost as if we are just going to go this route and there's nothing else we can do.
I think probably what he's referring to is we're not going to go long ball. I don't think it's literally we're going to do the same thing, because I do think that, plan A can evolve and you can bring different ideas into the equation. But I can understand why it was construed as we're just going to do exactly the same thing. Yeah. And I can see why that would worry fans. So sometimes what you're saying in the context that you meant it is absolutely fine, but you've just got to be a bit wary of how, fan bases at certain moments are going to receive it.
No, I suppose that's what, James mentioned it there about potentially, trying to whip the crowd up and be that little bit more animated. I suppose that was what my question was getting at, was he is so calm and collected, and in some ways that comes across in the team. Whereas, for example, you look at when Gareth Ainsworth was there, he's a sort of passionate, heart on his sleeve guy that's gonna get the team playing well, whilst no one style of fits all. It just seems the team plays very much in Mike Dodd's image. It's very calm, very controlled, but not enough bite.
Yeah, no, that's Joe. That's pretty much what it is. They're good on the ball, but it's more like a Sunday stroll in the park after church sort of thing. There's no real aggressiveness. There's no real tenacity. There's no real urgency. It's very, very passive. And I don't think Mike Dodds doesn't want that. He says he wants to win games of football. Like who doesn't want to win a game of football, especially on the run that he's on? He needs a win. But we've seen it the last few games, excluding Reading, because that's the first time Wycombe have scored 2 goals in a game since April. Wycombe just need that aggressiveness. They need that tenacity. And unfortunately, they don't have that at the moment. It's too passive. It's a case of, if the ball's gone out, I'll jog back. Case in point, on Tuesday, I don't know what happened here, but the ball was up in the air, and James Tilley, he must be a yard or 2 away. He just didn't run to the ball. And I'm thinking, you're the closest one next to it. You've got like 2 or 3 Colchester players that are around 15, 20 yards away from you, but they got there before him. He just sort of stood there and was like, shall I go for it? Shall I not? And then when he did go for it, he didn't sprint. He sort of like jogged. I'm thinking, That's not good. It just came across really, really relaxed. And unless you're 4-0 up with a few minutes to go, you know the game's safe, then yeah, you could potentially do that. But when it's 1-1 in your first EFL Trophy Cup game against a side where there's a bit of beef between Wycombe and Colchester, if you go back to non-league days, you need to show that tenacity. And unfortunately, I love Wycombe. I mean, I've grown to love the club in the time that I've reported on them in the last 6 to 7 years. So I really want the club to do well. And I just think at the moment, as you say, Joe, they're lacking that bite. They're lacking that tenacity, and they need it, because if they don't, they're going to be dropping more points. Before you know it, you're going to get to October and you're going to see where you're going to be in the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope as well, as much as there's always a conversation around the head coach whenever a team's getting certain results, I do think there needs to be questions levelled at other people in the club as well. And I think that needs to be spread out a bit. I'm not 100% on the likes of Dan Rice upstairs and the decision making, so there's certain things that I would question as well. But I understand why a lot of the question marks get levelled at the head coach.
Well, the thing is, as well, is that Wycombe have this long-term goal of being in the Premier League, and there's nothing wrong in that. We've seen it with other teams. You know, look at Bournemouth back in 2008-9. They were on the verge of going bust, going into the National League, and they got promoted within 7 years to the Premier League. So it's doable. Brentford, League One, League Two for many, many years, got to the Premier League. Look at Luton, you know, National League to Premier League within a decade. So it's very doable, and the board are investing a lot of money, not just in players, because Wycombe have spent a lot of money on players, money that is obscene for a club like Wycombe. And they've invested a lot of money in improving the facilities at Adams Park, like a lot of money. They've did the training ground, Marlow Road. I haven't seen it since it's been redone, but I've seen the photos, I've seen the videos. It looks insane. It looks insane. Like, the facilities are top notch. So the club are investing, and they've obviously spent a lot of money in the academy, because they want Wycombe to have one of the best academies in the world. They're trying to recruit players from the Eastern European side of the world, because that's where the owner's from. But all of that is fantastic on paper, and long term it's going to be good. But the short term is being impacted at the moment, because we can continue the run of form. They're not going to be in League One much longer. I know it's only September, but 9 defeats in 14 is not promotion form.
Absolutely. We've got to stop there because the office is closing, so we've got to draw that to a close. But I really appreciate your insight on this, James Richings, and everyone. I'd implore you to go and subscribe to the Bucks Free Press and also to Off the Line blog for more content from the excellent Joe Pope. Thanks to all my guests this evening. Thanks to you for watching at home, and we'll see you again for another League One podcast next week.